This presentation is entitled Canada by Alexandria Rich. A brief introduction to Canada. Relative to land size, Canada is the second largest country, following up behind Russia. Currently, the leadership of Canada is still being held by the Queen of England. Canada is known for having an abundance of natural resources such as natural gases, oil, and other mineral resources. More familiarly, Canada is known for its healthcare system that is always being compared to that of the United States. Now let's discuss moral issues facing Canada. Issue number 1, quality healthcare and improvements. The current system is antiquated and it takes a large amount of time for individuals to actually get in to seek the treatment that they need. The coverage is basic in that it's generic to cover a large range of individuals and their associated needs. The coverage is also expensive in that healthcare is funded at a provincial and federal level via taxation from personal and corporate income taxes. What this could mean to an employer is that, depending on the amount of employees that they have, their taxes could increase to a large amount, meaning that they would suffer from large taxation per employee to cover federal healthcare coverage. Issue number 2, economic growth and stability. The Bank of International Settlements is an entity that promotes global monetary and financial stability through international cooperation. This entity issues a series of warnings to indicate that financial crisis may be ahead. The warnings are issued on 4 different categories. These categories are credit to GDP gap, debt service ratio, household debt service ratio, and cross-border claims to GDP. The credit to GDP gap means the speed of credit changing in contrast to the gross domestic product. Debt service ratio means the level of debt servicing, which are the payments required to maintain good standing. The household debt service ratio is very similar to debt service ratio, but on a smaller scale based on household. These 3 things are also affected by the property price gap. Typically, higher property prices could mean a good sign for the economy, in that individuals are paying more to live in certain households in certain areas, which could increase the stability of the economy in that particular area. In this instance, that is not the case. Property price gap could be negatively affecting the economic growth and stability of the country. Lastly, cross-border claims to GDP. Countries have different obligations or different commitments that they make over time and across the borders with different other countries. The cross-border claims to GDP can be too large to the point that it has a negative effect on the economic growth and the stability of the country over time. This is an issue that has been facing Canada for quite some time now. Relevant stakeholders and stakeholder interests. Issue number 1 concerning healthcare. The relevant stakeholders are citizens, employers, and government. Their associated interests are, for citizens, they want better and timely coverage, without understanding that this coverage comes at a price. That price ultimately is paid by the employers and the government. For employers, their interests are they would like to provide better coverage, but at an affordable price. What this means is that they would not like to be taxed more just to be able to provide affordable and effective coverage per employee. Lastly, the government. The government also would like to provide coverage to citizens, but without going into a financial crisis. They would like to confirm that the economy will be stabilized, but also that citizens would have the necessary health care coverage needed to live a healthy lifestyle. The second issue concerning the economy is also affected by the first issue of healthcare. The relevant stakeholders are businesses and corporations, the government, and ultimately the citizens. For businesses and corporations, as previously mentioned, the fear is that the taxation would be increased, which would cost more for businesses and corporations to effectively provide the funds needed to fund the healthcare system. For the government, a financial crisis is underway because in the previous slide, we discussed the warning signs that are issued by the Bank of International Settlements. And if they continue at the current rate, then a financial crisis would be inevitable. Lastly, but more importantly, the citizens are affected. Citizens are affected because they're at risk of not having coverage or having coverage that it would not be suitable to live a healthy lifestyle. The economic stability of the government would also affect the end users, which are the citizens. Step 5, alternative actions. For the healthcare issue, a better split between citizens, employers, and government could be a way to review and revise the way that the system is currently handled. It may just take a few revisions to find a better split that would be more beneficial to all parties. Premium coverage plans. What this would be is sort of a buy-in or pay-in plan where individuals who wanted a higher level of coverage could buy in or pay a premium amount to receive better coverage other than the basic and generic coverage plan. Issue 2 regarding the economy. Cuts in other areas. Although the government is currently funding the healthcare system in connection with the employers and the personal taxation, they could offer or potentially review the other areas of the budget to see if there's a cut that they can make to put more dollars into the healthcare system and into the relationships with other countries and other entities in an effort to stabilize the economy. This also falls into the second idea of increased trading. Increased trading could build stronger relationships with other people outside of Canada, which could ultimately have a positive effect on the economy. Step 6, pros and cons. For issue number 1 dealing with healthcare, the better splits for pros and cons, we have for a pro, unequal responsibility sharing. What this means, although it does not sound like a pro, what it means is that right now, the responsibility of funding the healthcare system is unequal. So with review and revision, possibly there's a better way that that system could be broken down so that all parties have a better split and more responsibility or less responsibility, if that's the case, to fund the healthcare system. The con is that in the event that the responsibility is shared and more is needed from the citizen or from a business, those individuals or those entities may not be able to sustain their current business models if more funding is needed or if more resources are needed from those individuals or entities. Premium plans. A pro would be a buy-in plan to put more responsibility back on the citizens, which will also increase some funds that the government is receiving from the citizens. So it's not just the citizens taking away from the government, but now they're also buying in or paying into a plan because they desire better healthcare coverage. The con would be for individuals who really need a better healthcare plan. They can't afford a better healthcare plan. So then that puts those individuals in a bind and they wouldn't be sure of what to do or how to obtain better healthcare coverage. Issue 2 with the economy. To have the cuts in other areas of the government's funding, a pro would be cutting another area would free up some funding to put back into the healthcare area or back into areas that are struggling with the financial responsibility that they're currently holding. A con would be The budget is stretched thin. There's nowhere to cut these dollars from. So there really isn't a place to look for the funding. Increased trading. A pro would be building stronger relationships across the border with other countries. But a con would be, although those relationships have been built and trading has been increased, that still may not help the government, and that may not help the overall funding of the government to become more stabilized. Step 9, preferable actions. For healthcare, we're going to decide to just choose premium plans. That way, this puts some responsibility back on the citizens to take control of their own healthcare needs and buy into these premium plans to obtain the coverage that they need to live a healthier lifestyle. Issue 2, regarding the economy. We're going to decide to make cuts in other areas of the government that could potentially not be affected in a great way by a small cut or a minor cut. In conclusion, the goal will be to have better health care for citizens and to have a stabilized economy. What that will entail would be budget cuts from other areas to put money back into the current government's budget to provide a more sustainable mechanism. Additionally, we would have premium plans where employees or citizens could take more control of their coverage by buying in or paying into a plan that would ultimately help their financial situation and help their economic situation and help their healthcare situation, because now they have coverage that they truly need. Thank you for your time. The end.